This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels with Carina Lawson for the first time. She is an executive mentor, certified high performance coach. And thank you for joining the program today. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Phantom. I'm delighted to be here on the show, and I'm eager to dive into some meaningful conversation today.
It's always great. We want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You see that icon up that says listen on Newsly. So if you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription. We will be on Newsly later today. Again, if you use the Ghost coupon, you get 1 month premium subscription, and we are a featured podcast there. So, what we always like to do is get into the career of being an executive mentor or high performance coach. Maybe you could start with like, how did you get into this field?
Sure. So I've had the pleasure of having had an executive coach earlier in my career. And for the first time since I graduated college, somebody asked me, like, what do you want to do? Like, what, and I hadn't asked myself that question because I was just going through the motions of getting the degrees and getting a job. And I felt like my career kind of like lacked direction because I hadn't really given it that much thought, to be honest. So right now, because of that experience, I now help high achieving professionals and entrepreneurs create more balance and more ease and more efficiency in their schedules so that they can lead more fulfilling lives from work to weekend. And it was because of the birth of my twin girls that led me to pursue a career in coaching. And because I always thought about, okay, if I can just cross off one more item on the to-do list, then I can do this other thing without even taking a pause or taking a breather. And I worked myself to the ground without knowing, and it was a very slow burn. But when it happened, it did come on very strong, and it showed up in my health. And it certainly could have been avoided had I been more clear about where it is that I wanted to go, had I been more diligent about creating more energy, and not just focused on being productive. Having the courage to set more boundaries would have been like an asset at the time, but I felt like, oh, no, I'll just keep carrying on. And having the frame of mind to then be able to influence people around me in my teams to deliver on their end as well. So that's why I think this work is really important. What led me to be really to dive into getting the certifications and really lean into helping others do the same.
Yeah, I think it's important to set, parameters, because all of us, I'm a musician, I'm a podcaster, and I'm an IT professional. And being a musician and a podcaster, those things are my passion. And in my day job, as a designer, software designer, that's like my day job. But I had to find a way to like, how do I do all these things, right? And do the things I love to do, and not, I made the decision in my life I wanted to have kind of a balance where I wasn't going to be like doing like this overachiever thing totally just in my software design career, because I wanted to have room for art because I'm an artist. And I've had to find a way to balance the things I love to do with my responsibilities in my career. And I think sometimes it's hard to figure out, like for some people, like, to have that balance. Was that something that you talk to people, like, how do you achieve that type of, you know, I don't know, consistency or parameters around your life?
Yeah, well, I think before we even have a conversation about balance, and I'm sure the musicians in the audience will appreciate that you have to fine tune your instrument before you even start to play, right? If it's not tuned just right, it doesn't matter what song you play, it's not going to sound right. So when we talk about balance and my youngest daughter loves to, well, not youngest by 2 minutes, they're twins, but she loves to cook. And whenever she puts things on a scale, like I just watched her do this the other day, and it just hit me. Like the recipe wasn't going to come out right because and she even said to myself, oh, it's not set to zero. It's that calibration, that everyday inquiry that we must make within ourselves. Like, are things as they should be? Because a scale can be off balance even if there's nothing on it. Like your instrument is not going to play the right song. Like it's not going to sound its best if it's not tuned. So having the clarity to ask yourself those questions, like, am I feeling okay? Like, the importance of boundaries, that's great, but am I communicating those boundaries to myself so that I'm not pushing myself beyond my limits? What do I need to do to rest and restore, so that I can play the best music, right? So that am I resting and restoring, so that I can do my best work? And when people talk about work-life balance, they always put work first. And I think it's so important to do your life's work, right? So that you're in alignment and not just in balance, but you're in alignment. Because I often feel like it feels like there's a competing demand, and oftentimes there are. But what if you ask yourself the right questions so you learn to love your job a little more, or if you learn to take better care of yourself so that you could do the best work and it felt easy. So I think that's really important to kind of take the time to calibrate and take the time to fine tune, um, uh, so that you can do your best without like the extra effort, right?
Yeah, because I think what I've learned in my music and in my day job is like when I'm 55 now, but when I was in my 20s, I know that people will be like, "Oh, we're gonna go crazy, be these road warriors." I was on the road all the time, flying here, flying there. Spend 12 hours working at my desk. And there's like this the law of diminishing returns. Like even then when you're a musician, like if I sit in my studio and I spend like 6 hours trying to get something right, what I find is if I actually just like, I can't just sit there and keep on doing the same thing over and over. Eventually you have to decide, you walk away, you come back, you have a better perspective. So it's law of diminishing returns. If you just keep on sitting in your programmer and you think sitting for 10 hours straight is a good idea, it's probably not, because then you get tunnel vision. You sometimes you have to walk away to see the big picture. And what I found is some people think that just like, well, if I just go at it and just keep on going at it, it's going to get better. And what they forget is sometimes you need that perspective. They kind of taking a break is not actually against trying to solve it, right? Or walking away from something and coming back to it is not against trying to balance it out, because then you actually start to look at the holistic picture.
Oh, absolutely. And, oftentimes when people compare themselves to somebody else, oh, so and so is working this way and working this many hours, we feel compelled, to do the same. When in fact, we have different productivity archetypes. We're not the same. So we have these unique abilities of learning, and we have our unique abilities of doing our best work. And some people might be like big picture thinkers. Others, they might be like more compelled to work in operations. I'm somebody who loves the nitty gritty in the operations, which also means that can lead to perfectionism. So I need to check myself every once in a while. But it's so important to know what that is. Like, are you an early riser or a night owl? There's so many different things, but
Mhm.
asking yourself those questions, like, when do I do my best work? What is enough to me, right? So absolutely.
And why did you like start your own business? Because what I find with a lot of people is like eventually like you're working for other people, and then you find out you're not satisfied, right? That you really aren't really doing what you want. Because some people like, well, they're trying to meet expectations of what somebody else wanted or what their parents wanted or what people could do, and then they find out, I'm a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I kind of got into being a lawyer, but now I want to do something else. Or I'm working in a business, but I actually wanted to have my own business. And maybe I don't part of that, but that's, when's that kind of moment? Did you have that moment where you decided I want to kind of take the reins and start my own thing?
I love that question. It was the moment when I knew I was sick. I knew that I didn't feel right. And I remember sitting in my daughter's bedroom, and I was putting them to sleep, and I was watching them. And it was the moment that I figured out why I wasn't well. I didn't know what was wrong. I eventually would find out weeks later. I found out that I had not one, but two chronic illnesses because I was working too much. And I looked at my children, and I just remember thinking, I don't want, and I realized that it was because I didn't communicate my boundaries to myself, right? And for anyone who's listening who may be parents, and especially when you have little ones, like you tend to go without sleep for a long time, or if you're a student or and you're working on your degrees and things like that, you tend to push a little harder. And I remember looking at them and just thinking, I want to be around, and I don't ever want them or their friends or other, people that they know to ever feel like that they're not enough. Because I realized at that minute that the reason why I was doing all these things is because I didn't feel enough within myself. Oh, I'll just reschedule my doctor's appointment. It's okay. And that's when I realized that I wanted to help people make empowered decisions with their time. I didn't know how. I didn't know that I would eventually design a planner. That came the next day when I had a conversation with a lovely friend of mine at work, and I was just, I was like, I just can't figure it out, Sandy. I've got my planner and I've got this, and I just can't figure out where I'm going wrong. And then she said, Carina, you're trying to approach the issue from, I kept approach the issue. I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to take care of the kids. I have to come to work, and I have to be better at my job so that I can do well. But then when I realized that I could change that thought into I get to, that's when I knew that I wanted to design something that would help people make empowered decisions with their time, starting by putting themselves on the agenda. So that same day, I had lunch with my coworkers, and I had a piece of paper, and I just literally drew what today is the weekly spread of the Ponderlily planner that started with intention. And then the to-do list was small on purpose, and it ended with gratitudes and positive habits, because everything else, I knew that if I was given a whole book that was completely blank, and I had to write all the things that I had to do, I knew that I would tick some boxes and I wouldn't. And at the end of the day, I would feel like crap, right? So, and a lot of people that I noticed, and I did so much research. In fact, my master's is in workplace wellness. So I talked to a lot of people about what made them feel like they were at the top of their game, that they were performing well, and that they were doing well both at home and at work. And I looked at their calendars, I looked at their planners, and on the margins, they would always write workout, ? Go for a walk, ? Where were they? Like all the to-dos were for other people. And so that's when I realized, and my clients, they don't forget to pick up the milk, Phantom. They don't. Like, okay, they're very much there, and there are people like you and your listeners. They're at the top. They know their stuff. They know. The thing is that they often forget to take care of themselves, and when they feel like they're taking care of themselves, then they're like, oh, I didn't achieve this thing. So I wanted to bridge the gap between, to find a place where ease and efficiency meet. So that's when I figured out that that I was made for more than, and by the way, I still work my 9 to 5 and I love my job. I'm a certified business analyst, and that, like, basically my training, my master's in business administration actually allowed me to create a company that was very lean, very efficient because of my training. So there's no competing demand here. I feel like I've really leaned into my strengths when, most people would have thought, oh my God, Carina, what, actually people did say that to me. What are you doing? Your twins are 8 months old. You're 40 years old. What are you doing? Like, getting into a creative industry that you don't know much about, and in an area, in a field that's completely out of your league. But basically, what I'm trying to say is that my intent spoke louder than any. I didn't hear any of it. I just, every 15 minutes that I had before putting my kids to bed, or during my lunch break, I would Google like how to do this. Like, and I asked my sweet friends who are graphic designers to teach me design speak. And so, long story short, I launched a planner company that's been featured in Forbes. I've been in the BBC, and that's just because the intent spoke louder than anything else that I could have heard. Like, the mission is bigger than that.
Yeah, I think it's like the drive when you're an artist is like why do musicians, we don't get paid all the time, right? A lot of times if we're trying to get paid, that's not why you're a musician, right? But a lot of times you do it because you love it. And then what happens is opportunities present themselves. You end up getting to work with people that you didn't imagine just because you show up. Like, part of what I found is like just showing up caused an opportunity. With this podcast, back in 2016, I fell into it. Somebody came to me and interviewed me because I'm a musician. They found my SoundCloud and they said, "Hey, I want to interview you." I didn't even know what a podcast was. And then I ended up finding out that I liked it. After the first episode, me and the interviewer actually did a podcast because we liked each other so much. And then we did it for like 6 months. And then I said, "Wow." And then I just found it kind of came to me. I wasn't looking to be a podcaster. I kind of fell into it. And it's one of those things where sometimes if you just show up or you keep yourself open, things happen. And people say, "Well, how can podcasting help you if you're a musician?" And you're not even talking to musicians all the time. It's just the fact that if you show up, like just showing up actually presents tons of opportunities. And we've been able to get into things, and now we're being more deliberate about it. But sometimes things will, you got to kind of keep your ears open. Like, I think I hear the family, but I have my family home too. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you hear that voice and they say, "Hey, this is cool," and then you run with something. Like, sometimes if something comes to you and you're like, "Hey, I'm going to run with it," and it wasn't like I was directed to do that, but it kind of, I saw it and then I jumped on it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, the serendipity of it all, right? And then you discover a passion that you didn't know you had. That's so nice.
So I think, like, with people, one of the questions you have is like, what advice do you have for people that want to start their own businesses, or people who think maybe they're not ready? And I think a lot of people have a fear. Like, when you're a musician, the fear before you even become a musician is like, "Oh, am I good enough to even be on stage?" So I think I can think about equating that to a person who's like wants to start a business, but then they don't think they're good enough to do it. So then they don't do it. So they get kind of stuck in a loop and they never take the jump to make that decision. Like, what kind of advice do you have for people who are kind of on the cusp, but are kind of scared, or they got that fear factor?
I would say if there's fear like that is playing I would say surround yourself with examples of people who overcame adversity and did it anyway. So that would be one thing. And then the other thing is, like, surround yourself with people who do that now. Talk to business owners. They might not be in the same field as you. And so that as long as get in the room, basically just stay in the room. And the third advice that I would have is to, little by little, don't put pressure on yourself, but just, do a little research here. I had no business, like launching a planner company. I didn't know the first thing, but honestly, like, I would just for 15 minutes every day, every once in a while, I would just Google how to publish a planner, like, how to do this, like, or I would ask people. And even though I didn't necessarily have examples of people who had launched businesses, I would read about them, and I would be around creative people. I didn't think of myself as creative as a business analyst, right? Until someone said, but the way that you come up with solutions to some of the problems that we have at work are quite creative. And that's when I went,
Yeah.
create a little dot, like, like, and that's what that is. And, as long as you do those three things, you're going to get closer to your goal and create a habit, I would say. Like, lastly, and the fourth thing, if I had to say, create a habit that gets you towards your goals, right? How do business owners act? What are they like? How do they walk? How do they talk? And then, like, try to, I have this thing about, like, how, since I've been on a journey to work on my health, I always thought people who are super healthy, they walk a little taller. And I would notice, like, and they speak with confidence. And somehow, instead of doing, and then I go into the gym first, and then I'll have, the goal, hitting that target, and then that will make me be a healthy person. I started being a healthy person first, like thinking like a healthy person. Would a healthy person do this? And then I would then be like, okay, because I was walking a little taller, because I was feeling a little bit more confident, then I got the courage to lace up and put my shoes on and start going for a walk. And little by little, that grew. And surrounding myself with healthier people was also like a pivotal moment. But if you're thinking about opening a business, find examples of where of other business owners, be in the room with other business owners, create a habit that takes you towards your goals. And yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's like the synergy because I'm also a BSA. I've been a BSA since like 1993, and I've kind of gone in different ways. I'm a consultant now. What I found is I didn't like being in the bureaucracy of any one company because I would hit the wall because I'm kind of like, if you think about the, if you think about the kind of the different mechanisms that they use to measure people, because I'm a creative person, sometimes I wouldn't really fit. And because I had ideas that kind of outside the bell curve, right? If you think about it, so it's sometimes like business, like they talk about how they want creatives, but then they try to put everybody in a box. Kind of like when Henry
Right.
Ford took all these people who were, you know, artisans and it made them sit on the assembly line. Well, that take all the creativity away because they're all going to get measured on how fast they do something on the assembly line. But if you want somebody that's actually going to be an engineer, well, being on the assembly line type of thinking ain't going to make them an engineer, right? They're going to just keep on doing the same thing. And then you want
Precisely.
people who are going to be in that cubicle, but how are you going to get like Elon Musk idea or Bill Gates idea or Steve Jobs idea from somebody just sitting in the cubicle that's told to, get these certain performance goals and they're all trying to match everybody else. So what I found is if I got to be was a consultant, I could go bounce from thing to thing and I'd have to worry about the performance review. Every day is the performance review. If
Yeah.
I'm a consultant, I'm on the job, just being renewed every time. That's my performance review. I get renewed 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So I ended up saying, well, I don't want to play the other game anymore. And I just made a decision for myself that because I wanted to have the time to do the things I want to do, but then not be measured in that way. And so I kind of broke the paradigm. And sometimes, well, oh, how can you do that? Well, sometimes you have to just think out the box and break it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts about that, but I think the idea is just sometimes the unexpected is that you don't keep on doing the same thing all the time.
I completely agree.
The
Uh,
way that you break out of it is you're the one that raises your hand when no one wants to raise their hand. You're the one that
yeah.
steps up when nobody wants to step up.
And when you willingly do that, that's the beauty of it, right? Before, like, life happens, right? In my case specifically, I had a health issue because I just didn't step out because that would have been the unknown. But being open to possibilities and being open to new ways of thinking is so important. And questioning yourself, like, right, and that's the work that we do with high performance coaching. We talk about different areas where we don't normally, and just today I was talking to a client and then I said, what areas are you what habits are taking you away from your goal? And he's like, oh my gosh, nobody has ever asked me that before. So, well, let's talk through your day. And then he didn't realize that something that he was doing was completely taking him off left field. But again, because we sometimes we live our lives by default instead of by design, right? That you feel like you don't have the space, and creating um, that moment of pause to recalibrate and to think about what else is there. How else could I solve this problem? How can I get out of the box, right? Like it's so important. It's such a gift too.
Also, I think like being an African American, and then dealing with diversity, like women and all kinds of other people. What I've noticed just over my example, like in IT, a lot of times I don't see people like look like me or look like you. I don't see
Mhm.
lots of diversity. I see like the same type of guy, like a lot. And then they're wondering why they keep on doing the same things. Well, you're not open. The world is a multinational, multicultural world, right? And then you got this room, it doesn't look like the rest of the world, right? So how they opening up to allow women to get positions of power, to allow other people that haven't been in the room get positions actually opens your markets, because you start to take on ideas that maybe you would have never took on if you get the same people over and over making the same decisions.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting. Like, so Ponderlily is 100% built on diversity. I'm originally from Brazil, and I live in the Middle East, right? And my company is based in the UK, because that's where our home is. And so when I first floated the idea to my father-in-law, like, hey, I've got this business plan for a planner company, and he was looking through the business side of things. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a creative and much, much, much younger than I am. So she's like, yeah, we were talking about social media and things like that. And I initially started working with a social media company because I didn't know how to do social media at all. And I said, wouldn't it be like, I really want to feature different types of women on the feed. And, let's start with a picture of me. And they said, well, Carina, I don't think a picture of you would fit the aesthetic of the feed. And at first I was like really taken aback because I didn't know what that meant. And then I looked at my feed
Mm.
and I saw a very, very different aesthetic to what I had in mind, which is, Ponderlily is for people who work. Like, whether that work is done in the C-suite, whether that's done in a cubicle, whether that's done by a 20-year-old, a 40-year-old, I need to showcase different types of people who want to make empowered decisions with their time. And the minute that person said to me, that was the day that I realized that maybe they shouldn't be on my payroll, because that they were speaking to somebody who's obviously a woman of color who like is of a certain age, but like, in the creative world, right? People don't necessarily expect a 42-year-old woman breaking into like the world of graphic design and things like that. Yeah, but that was something that I definitely encountered when I first joined this industry, and I'm working and doing my best to change that. Like, right, like, so even
Yeah.
with the products that we source, they're not necessarily aimed at one particular person.
Well, that's the thing, is like the entry level, sometimes the gatekeeping. The one thing I love about social media, because I've been in it, as a podcaster and a musician, I'm all over Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, all those places. That's how we use those tools. But the gatekeepers, like in the music industry, you couldn't even get out there without the A&R and in the management. They would make judgment decisions, and you couldn't even present yourself. Now we live in a world where if you create a TikTok, you can come from outside, and you didn't go through A&R. You're not on the label roster. You come from the outside, and tons of people are coming from the outside into the industry, and they're like, the industry doesn't know what to do, because they try to bring them in, and they're like, why would I come in? Like, I'm independent already. So people like in our industry, people are becoming their own entrepreneurs. Like when you're a musician, you run your own business. You do your own, PR, you do your own booking, you do a lot of your own work because we're not on the label structure anymore. We're all independent entrepreneurs. And so there's a lot of work, and you're like, well, where's the time to create? But you have to kind of figure out what you can do and what you can't do, and then you farm things out. But the idea is like that now that they have this international internet world where you can hit all types of markets. If you were living in New Jersey, you're not just singing for New Jersey. You could be singing for the whole world. And so you have to think about like, wow, I'm not limited. So you have to realize you have this big marketplace that you maybe you didn't you in the previous world it would be localized. Now you guys have a wider frame. So how do you handle that in terms of when you're looking at your business? You already mentioned multiple countries that you're involved in. Um, is that something that you bring to people when you're mentoring people or talking to other business people?
Yeah, so we are very much a company that's focused on diversity and focused on people who work wherever that work is done. So there are certain common themes that people in the workplace face or entrepreneurs face, and I typically deal with issues related to productivity, work-life balance. If somebody wants a promotion, but I'm prepared and equipped to handle questions like, no, Karina, you don't understand. This is why I'm not getting a promotion. And because, like, I think not only the fact that I am a person of color, but because I'm trained to understand that in some cases that is a fact that they may not necessarily be getting a promotion. It feels like fact to them. And I'm not going to dismiss that. So I'm prepared not to dismiss that at all. Whereas some people might say, oh, you just need to have a growth mindset. Like, no. Like, we need to have a conversation about this. In some places, this is a fact.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So been there. So it's really important to be sensitive to these issues and be sensitive and open to where people are coming from. Yes, we do have a company that sells products worldwide. I do work with clients all around the world. And I try to listen to, like, I know I listen to what they're saying and where they're coming from. And we're not going to go 360 and just go like, oh, let's just think positive thoughts here and everything's going to work out. That's not how this is. It's not the work that we're going to do, but like, I'm very, very aware that this does exist. I'm very aware that a growth mindset is important, but in the context of dealing with equality, and it's very, very important to have that in the back of your mind and work with it as well.
So when you're in a global kind of situation, I guess you try to focus on commonalities so you don't have to have unique solutions for every area. But it would seem like because globally people aren't the same, cultures aren't the same, that there probably are, maybe a top 5, top 10 list of commonalities. But do you have to deal with the cultural differences for every region that you're in, and then understand those and tailor make things? Because we're kind of living in an age where, pharmaceutical companies are starting to tailor make medicine, where they used to make it, oh, everybody's the same, and now they're actually going to the DNA level and making customized medicines for people's unique biology. So it's come kind of full circle where it's like, yeah, maybe humans aren't exactly the same, even on the DNA level. So maybe you do have to have some customization.
Oh, absolutely. And with the way that I coach with people, I work on a 3-pronged approach. Like, within my coaching curriculum, I talk about awareness a lot. Like, and I'll just give you an example. When I was 8 years old, I decided that I learned that if I slept in my uniform, I could sleep in an extra 5 minutes. Okay. Like, I am not like a morning person by any stretch of the imagination, never have been. And for the longest time, I forced myself to be that person, because the message that you get everywhere is that early risers they're better, they're more productive, they're just, They're just better. Like you
Yeah.
see entrepreneurs talking about, which is not, and by the way, it's not necessarily true. President Obama, I read somewhere that he was a night owl, right? So there's, but I didn't know
Yeah.
this
Some
at the
people are
time.
now.
Exactly. So we're bombarded with these messages, right? About, like, for example, let's take entrepreneur morning routines, right? I read somewhere that this person wakes up and they journal and they meditate and they go to their workout for an hour, they go to their infrared sauna, and it's not even 5 a.m. And I'm like, wow, that's wonderful. However, that may not be realistic to somebody who is a nurse. That may not be realistic to somebody who is a musician, and you guys work late nights, right? So you don't
Yeah.
necessarily wake up
Yeah.
at 5 in the morning.
Hey,
Some
we're
of
not
you
waking up.
do.
Yeah.
My dad was a professional athlete, and he is very much a morning person, and yet I wasn't. And for the longest time, I kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And a lot of my clients are the same way. It's like, no, Karina, I must be a morning person. And I'm like, but why? So having that so we have this awareness that we're not waking up early, right? And so then I start asking questions about why that is. And of course, like the coaching then becomes more tailored, because what part of that are you willing to accept? And again, I'll go back to my own example. I just one day accepted the fact that I define mornings differently. I'm also a morning person, but my morning is not a 5 a.m. kind of morning. Mine is kind of like around 7:30. Okay. So as long as I've accepted that, then I can take aligned action that doesn't feel so forced, and doesn't make me grumpy in the morning. Again, that's just an example. But when I work with clients, we do work on an inside out approach, because the last thing I want is to give them a cookie cutter thing and trying to make clients feel that they're round peg on a square hole. What can we do from having a learning of exactly who you are and standing in that power? It's like, you know what, this is who I am. I'm like, cool, what is your goal? Then we see what the goal is, and it's like, how can we take aligned action from that place of empowerment to get towards your goal? So for me, what that translated to, I'm like, okay, again, I learned this at 8 years old. If I sleep in my uniform, I can get five more minutes of sleep. That was my aligned action to sleeping in a little more and, still waking up on time, ready for breakfast. My parents were like, why is this girl all wrinkly? I'm like, we're sure we ironed this uniform the night before. But again, to this day, and we get these messages from media from everywhere, like, you should be this way. And, it takes a lot to say, well,
Yeah.
wait a minute, how can
It's
I
hard.
work? It's very hard. And instead of saying, oh no, I must continue trying to be this 5 a.m. waker upper, why can't we just say, you know what, this is who I am. Let's lean into that and let's see how we can get closer to your goals by leaning into your gifts in a way, right? So that's how I customize the work for someone who comes to coach with me. Of course, there's a lot more
Well, I
to
think a
that.
lot of people, what I found, like even in creativity, right? There's a problem kind of today where people like kind of sampling and electronic tools in the industry. People try to clone or copy a lot of whatever is popular instead of taking the whole point. A lot of times with art is your individual artistry is kind of like your unique voice. Like your voice is probably not like anybody else's, but if you spend all your time trying to sound like Taylor Swift, or Beyonce, where there's already a Taylor Swift, there's already a Beyonce. So wouldn't it be better to take your unique voice and do the best version of yourself and instead of trying to be somebody that you're not, because maybe you'll be 1/10 of them or 1/100th of them, but you're not you being you. And what I found is if you kind of start to realize what you bring to the table as an individual human being, everybody's got their own creative spark. And if you find out what's unique about you and then focus on that, focus on your individual creativity that might be inspired by other things, but it's uniquely your vision. You know, when you're an author and you write that book, that's your vision. You're out there with a strategy. Even I've talked to life coaches. Their creativity is their approach, their thinking, and they may be inspired by X person, Y person, Z person, but it's their own picture. Why they uniquely have a program is because they thought it through and they've created this kind of vision that is their own vision. And I think that's what people lose sight of because it's hard. It's like being in a classroom of kids and raising your hand, and people don't want to raise their hand because they're scared of what the response is going to be. Right. And I think when you're creative and you start to make that leap, you have to not be as scared of what the response is because you're going to fail. And failure is not a problem because as musicians, like we write thousands of songs, most of them don't work. It's like if I was worried about them not working, then I would never pick up the instrument again. So you have to kind of you understand that's part of the process is that you're going to have things that don't work, but they actually work because they get you closer to where the things that do work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Marie Forleo who says the world needs the gift that only you have, right? So, and I love that phrase. I love that because so I see, especially with marketing messages, they're marketing to the gap. It's like you're here, but you should be there. And to get there, you need this shiny new thing. Whereas my approach is like, which is the world just needs more of you. Like, how can we leverage that to achieve your goals? It's going to be like less of an uphill battle because that's what it can feel like. I cannot even think about in fact, there's an article that I collaborated with on Medium about morning routines because the minute I was approached to talk about that, I was just like, oh my God, I have some thoughts about morning routines. I'm not in the 5 a.m. club and I'm not a night owl. So you can only imagine how ostracized I felt like as somebody who owns a productivity company. The assumption out there is that, I wake up with the birds or whatever, but I oftentimes I will snooze my alarm, and one of my girls right now, she's not feeling too well. So I was up at night. So obviously I'm not going to be a happy, cheerful Carina first thing in the morning. Right. But it's just so important to lean in,
But
on
yeah,
who you are,
I think the
right?
perfection. I think the problem I see, like if you think about like an alpha male running a coaching for trying to get you in shape, and they've got
Mm,
like these 10 steps to stay in shape, and then you fail on step 2 and you got to start again. You fail on step 6, you got
yes.
to start again. I think that approach is okay. Fine, you're the alpha, whatever, and that's your idea. But a lot of times it's like, it's like in music. If you have to keep on starting and stopping versus doing what I call stream of consciousness, right? If I do stream of consciousness, there's a famous musician say that there are no wrong notes. It's how you approach the notes, right? So if you're so in your logic brain, oh, saying I missed the note, then you're going to keep on starting and stop. If you are getting into the kind of this feel heart kind of creative music feel where you're kind of listening to the universe, you're trusting yourself, you say, I can make these notes work. Because Victor Wooten was showing it some people, he's a famous bass player, that there are no wrong notes if I've got the right attitude. And he showed hitting all these different notes, but he was running a rhythm that the notes all worked. And you say people will tell you that you can't do that, but you can, right? So you don't have to start and stop. You can actually recover and actually use your creativity. You don't have to keep on going back and to the beginning. That you can actually recover from wherever you are. And I thought, I was like, that's a really cool approach. You could use that for all kinds of things.
Yeah, totally. I see productivity coaches go on Instagram and they're like checking off their boxes. And I'm like, there's a place for that. But then, you don't check off a box when you brush your teeth in the morning. That is just part of your lifestyle. And as a Like one of my certifications that I have is that as a habits coach, my goal is not to get you to tick a box. Like if your goal is to drink more water, whatever it is, like I just want to get you to be the person that drinks more water. End of story. There's not going to be tick boxes. We're going to find a way to make that part of your lifestyle and make it so seamless and so like that you just you can't help but win. Like if that's the goal that
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
have. I bring this up because both my grandmother and I were not big water drinkers, or at least I wasn't until I tried this method, and I was like, hang on a second, like nobody brushes their teeth or like does up their shoelace and ticks a box. That is just something that we naturally do. And if you want to pursue a habit, or if you, for example, if you want to be a musician, you don't tick a box. Like you might have started that way, but like it's just part of who you are. Like, right? Like your practice
yeah.
is part of who you are.
Yeah, you do it because you love it. If it feels like work, then
Yeah,
you probably don't wanna do it anymore because, like, you take a break because, like, when you're an artist, it kinda comes like, if you force it, then it usually doesn't work right? Like, things have to kinda have a flow. Like, I always talk about getting in the flow, getting that stream of consciousness to kind of feel the muse. Like, when you get in those states, you tend to have a really good time working. But if you are agonizing and is a problem and it's making you nervous, it's giving you like anxiety, you're not feeling happy, then what are you doing? Because
exactly.
the whole point of life is that you should be trying to do something to move you forward. If it's making you feel anxious, uncomfortable, sick, is that really good? Is that really what you want?
Yeah, like, with the whole waking up thing, I was trying to be the person who wakes up at 5 a.m. And every time that I would wake up at, say, 5:30, I'm like, oh, so my day was ruined, like from the start. And I'm like, there has to be a better way to do this. And the way that I found was just accepting and then becoming aware of it. It's like, you know what? That doesn't make me feel good when I do this. And yet I can still feel productive and feel accomplished, even though I don't wake up at this time. So when something becomes part of your identity, like you identify yourself as a musician, it's part of your lifestyle. You do it because you love it. It's not forced. And I get it. To get there, you do need the practice, but if it doesn't feel like practice, it just feels like, you're just playing music,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah,
playing.
it's like yeah, well, if when you're a business person, you probably go through certain routines to stay, I'm a BSA, right? So I have to learn, started on mainframes. Now we're learning blockchain. We learned Java. We learned whatever tools, whatever, we had waterfall. Then we learned agile. Then we learned, use case. Then we learned whatever. We can't stay back in the 3270 COBOL world. That's where I started. But there are some guys that want to stay there. And I said, oh, fine. But like, in order to progress, you had to kind of get out of that because that technology, you could live in it. And I know guys that will live in that because there's still banks and stuff that have it. But like, you're only going to be in that narrow niche. I mean, that's fine if that's where you want to be. But if you want to progress, you kind of got to learn. And what I found is like the idea of technology is you're always a student, right? There's always something new coming. And you should probably, and you're constantly aware of what you don't know. And then you have to be willing to learn the new thing to get to that new place. And so it is a constant state of re-education. And some people don't like that. Some
Yeah.
people don't realize that, like, well, it's comfortable to stay in a certain zone. And then you got to realize that what kind of person are you? Are you the kind of person that wants to stay in that place? Then you come to, reality and say, yeah, I guess I am the kind of person that I don't like to challenge myself. That's my comfort zone.
Yeah, like as a high performance coach, like we push. Like if you come and tell me that your goal is to get a promotion in the next 3 months, well, we're gonna get to work, but we're gonna make sure that we're working towards your goal in a way that sits well with you. I mean, how many times have you had to do something and you've kind of what I call like, sometimes people procrastinate because they know they need to do this one thing. They don't know why they're doing it, but they need to do this one thing, and then they just decide to clean their cupboards, or let me just make this spreadsheet super nice, or let me work on my website one more time and change the fonts. So I'm the person that sits in their corner and goes, okay, but we said we were going to do this, right? So how are we getting there? How is that getting you towards your goal? What if we thought about something else to get you towards that goal? I'm the partner in the corner that makes sure that I get you to the finish line.
Have you ever, had to get it to a client that maybe their goal based on where they're at, they weren't really ready for?
Their goal is their goal, and
Mhm.
my job is to make sure that they get as close to it as possible. And there have been times when I've worked with someone and they actually came to the realization themselves. They're like, you know what? I think perhaps there's a different path for me, and we change a course.
Mhm.
So, and that's perfectly fine. Like how we do certain things, is at the end of the day, they need to feel happy and content with their decision, right? But making those tools to get them there is something that they can apply to any other area of their life, to any
Yeah.
other goal that they may have.
Well, sometimes people, when they set the goal, it's a matter of already actually setting the right goals. Because
Mm,
okay, you want to get to X, but you think, that these A, B, and C are the real pillars of what you need to do. And then you find out, well, those really aren't, right? That you actually got to start all over. Your foundational things that you think are going to bring you that to X aren't right, and sometimes some people don't want to hear that because they're
yeah.
kind of not ready to hear it. So if you run into somebody that's not ready to understand that their foundational point of view is actually not the right position to be in to go where they want to go.
I think that there's no right and wrong on getting somewhere. I mean, to be honest, there have been so many different stories of people in different walks of life who started doing one thing and ended up doing something else. I mean, the Post-it was an accident, right? Like when they
Yeah.
it was not
A happy
intended
accident. Yeah.
to,
Happy
yeah, it was a
accident.
happy accident. So I think that there are no mistakes. There's only learning. So the first cornerstone that I start working with someone is on their identity in terms of their values and how clear they are. Like, who do they want to be, and what do they want to live into? That's the first thing that we start talking about. And from there, that's when we build on, we only start talking about goals 4 sessions in. I want them to be very, very clear on who they are, what they stand for, before we
Mhm.
start to talk about where we're going. Because first we need to know, like like if you want to go to Paris, you could go to Paris either you can't drive there because there's an ocean between, depending on where you're starting, there's going to be an ocean to get to Paris, for example, right? Um,
Yeah, they
so
go
we
by
need to
boat,
first
boat or plane.
decide. Yeah, we need to decide, is this where you want to go? Are you sure you want to go there? You know,
Well, I
why
guess
are we
in
even
that
go
boat or
there?
plane example, yeah,
Yeah,
if you think about the boat or plane, what boats take a lot more time. The plane's gonna get there way faster, right? So do you
yeah.
wanna take the time and take the cruise to go through the experience of building up, or do you wanna quickly get there on the Learjet?
But in
Because
first
you could
session,
get
I just
there,
want to know if that's where they want to go. Where are we buying a
you just
ticket
wanna know
to?
where to
That's
go.
what I want to know. Yeah, because sometimes
Yeah,
people
and how
might
they do it.
say, well, I want to go to Paris because isn't everybody going to Paris? And I'm like, I don't know, are they? I'm from Brazil. Most people that I know like to go to Argentina. For example, why can't we go to Argentina? We need to decide
Yeah.
where we're going first and foremost, because you want to go there, not because everybody else is going there. Like, So like I want
Yeah,
to
that may
get
be
that very,
the
very
premise.
clear. Yeah, that your
Yeah,
goals are
so
going to be your own, not
so
someone
the
else's.
destination, that kind of be where like, well, there's it could be like it's really somebody else's idea to go to Paris, and they
Yeah.
think it's their idea, and then you discover that really they want to go to Alaska because they want to go see, you know, the wilderness, but they didn't think anybody would like that. They thought about they were concerned what their peers would think because they're not going to the more popular place. So that is like you start to figure out who they are. And it's kind of like I was saying with like Victor Wooden's, like there's no wrong note. It's kind of like how you play the notes. So once you get over the fact that like you actually you might think, oh, they're wrong notes or bad notes, but then you find out, well, like once you learn the correct approach where you're trying to go, you can get all the notes to work.
Yeah,
So that sounds kind of like
absolutely.
what you were saying.
Um,
What you were saying.
yeah. When I talk about goals with clients, I usually ask them, like, what's the destination? Where are we going together? You know? And then we really get a solid idea of where we're going. Once that happens, and I'm like, okay, let's map it out. Let's get the map. Let's see how we're gonna get there. Then we map things out. Then we set sail. Then once we set sail, we might need to adjust the course. Like, do we need to adjust the course here? Like, are we still happy with from where we started? And then once we get there, we need to like assess, was this a good trip? If we're going to make this trip again, like would we take the same route? And then we
Oh,
celebrate because like a lot of people like get to where they're going and they're like, okay, where to next? I'm like, wait, we didn't even take any pictures. We didn't even
no.
like sample the tweets of this land, and that will just make you tired, to prepare for the next journey. Like if we're not like, what's the point in all this traveling? What did we learn? Like, what did we celebrate? What did we take
Yeah.
with us? Like,
So you're
that's
saying
now going
like
to prepare us.
so you're saying the lessons learned. Some people never give themselves time for the lessons learned, right? Because
Yeah.
I've been on
Yeah.
lots of projects where it's very critical to actually document the lessons learned so the next team doesn't make the same mistake. But then sometimes you don't give yourself enough time to do that because you're already on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this great book called Winning the Week, and it's by Carrie and Demir Bentley. They're a husband and wife team, and I love that book because their method starts with um, what did we learn last week? And I'm like, oh my God, that completely caught me off guard because like how many times do we sit down and go, you know what did I learn last week? Like what happened? Like
Yeah.
it's just kind of like
Usually you
a
wait to
blur.
the
We're just
end.
on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a really
exactly.
good
We're on to
approach.
the next thing.
Well,
Yeah, because
most of
then
the
we
time
already
projects
started.
they wait to the end. If you're doing that weekly,
Yeah,
that's a really good assessment. It's more agile, because then
yeah,
you're
yeah,
actually looking at you're not waiting until 6 months into it to do the after action report. You're doing the assessment, which is more likely going to increase your quality or increase the likelihood that you're going to make your goal because you're actually looking at where you can way earlier in the process instead of waiting to the end and have to do it, for the next project. You could actually do it in the same project.
yeah, absolutely. Especially for people in the audience who are listening and they're entrepreneurs, there's no right way to do one thing. For example, if we talk about building your audience, some people might say, that Instagram is the best way, but there's also email and podcasting and webinars and whatever. Like, but what suits your personality is going to dictate whether this becomes an enjoyable experience or an experience that you absolutely hate. And so, guess which business owner is going to be more successful? Like, I'm pretty sure that it's the one that's having fun and having a good time and building an audience in a way that sits well with them. So like I know that one of the ways that I do this is not necessarily on Instagram. I'm much more comfortable having a conversation one on one with someone. I think this
Like a
is
podcaster, yeah.
um, yeah, like a
Yeah, well,
podcast or something, because
yeah,
yeah,
well,
it
there's
never
some,
sat well with me.
some tools are, some people can't take advantage of certain tools. And some people, the video podcast, they might not feel comfortable enough, and it looks so awkward that it wouldn't work. But the audio podcast might be fine. So they could do the audio better, or they could do the video. Depends on what the personality is, how dynamic, or how better. They have to make a decision about what they're comfortable with, and
Yeah,
like a long form versus the short form. And there's a kind of a whole ability to do a reel or a TikTok versus doing a long form video. Some people might be better at the long form infomercial, and some might be better at the 90-second TikTok. It depends on who they are or who they work with.
yeah. And what season in life they may be in, right? And I'm like, some people might feel like, I'm comfortable doing this now. But the beauty of being who we are is that we're never the same, right? Like the seasons change all the time. Like we change.
Yeah, you might get better.
Um, exactly, exactly. And so, but being open to that, like, is the real gift.
Well, I want the audience to be able to know that, for those of you in audio, as I mentioned, that you have www.ponderlily.com, and that will be clickable when we're fully published on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. You can click on that. So if you click on ponderlily.com, what does the audience find there when they go there?
When they go there, they get a free printable library. One printable that I highly recommend is Rhythms and Routines for Work. So if you, that takes into consideration how how you want your workday to start, how you want your workday to end, and the breaks that you need to have in between to re-energize yourself. So you're not stuck in the studio all day, and basically you set yourself up to do your best work and design a routine that really sits well with you and allows it to do your best work. And you also get a 10% discount on all Ponderlily products. And if you go at We Are Ponderlily on Instagram, I answer all of the DMs myself. And so if you have any questions, if there's something that you learned today, an aha moment that you took away from today's session, please feel free to let me know. I love to hear. I love to hear from the audience.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you again. I want to let everybody know that's clickable when we're fully published, and we'll be everywhere podcast or watched or listened to, places like Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google. And we'll have a landing page that we're going to give to you that your audience will be able to choose wherever they want to listen or watch. So thank you again for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. I believe it was really informative for all the business owners out there and all the entrepreneurs, and creatives are entrepreneurs. Every creative artist I've met has to find a way to sell their product, which is their art. And a lot of the ideas that you have, we have to learn to monetize what we're doing. And, it's not a widget, it's art, but still I believe a lot of the approaches you're talking about apply to multiple types of businesses, even the creative space. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Have a good rest of the day
You too.
or
Bye.
nighttime.